Proof of work cryptocurrencies are widely used in the blockchain space, and these cryptocurrencies are secured by miners who attempt to use their computational resources to solve what's called the proof of work inequality and post new blocks onto the blockchain. Now, for their efforts, miners are rewarded coins. However, as proof of work currencies have grown, the amount of resources needed to solve the inequality have also increased. So, to provide an avenue for miners with less resources, mining pools are used. And mining pools allow for miners to combine their computational power in order to post solutions to blockchain in a more consistent manner. So really, the point of mining pools is to combat the variance that's found inside proof of work. When miners are mining, payments can sometimes be inconsistent depending on whether or not they find a solution. So mining pools allow miners to combine their hash rate and essentially find solutions more consistently. Now, once a mining pool finds a solution, the reward is split between all the miners in the pool according to the amount of work that they perform. Now, mining pools have existed for quite a while now, proof of work. And since that time, we've seen quite a few risk factors involved with them, especially concerning centralization. So traditional mining pools are quite centralized in nature, and usually there's a single entity that is operating the pool, which gives them power over the entire collective computational resources on that pool. Theoretically, additionally, just having a centralized entity with control over block production goes against a lot of the ideas and ideals of a decentralized blockchain. So to solve this issue, we should try to create a decentralized version of a mining pool, which can help prevent some of these risks from materializing. So let's try to delve a little bit deeper into proof of work mining. So I mentioned the proof of work inequality before, and here it is. It's essentially this H of W is less than T. And what we're saying here is that you have some target value T defined by the blockchain, some hash function, and some value W that a miner is iterating upon. Valid solutions to the proof of work inequality must be that some hash of this value W is less than the target defined by the blockchain. If a miner finds a hash of W which is less than the target, then a valid solution has been found and it will be posted onto the blockchain as a block. When miners are mining, they're continuously applying H to different values of W until a solution is found, and the rate at which they apply H can be called their hash rate. It's essentially a measure of how much computational power a miner has. So, as we mentioned before, due to the random nature of proof of work and constant target adjustment, lower hash rate or miners with less computational power struggle to find blocks consistently, and mining pools are used to help mitigate that problem. Now, mining pools use a similar sort of inequality when they are attempting to figure out how much work a miner performed to their pool. So mining pools use this inequality. H of W is less than TP, where TP is the pool's target. Pool's target is greater than the blockchain's target, and what this means is that finding a share, which is sort of what you're trying to mine when you're mining on a mining pool, finding a share is much easier than finding a block. And specifically, I want to draw the connection between these two inequalities, HW is less than T and HW is less than TP. They're both very similar, as you can see. So now let's talk about how mining pools are able to take the amount of work miners perform and convert it into something that they can use to pay miners out. So there are multiple share processing algorithms used by mining pools today. I'll just briefly go over them. So the classic one is the pay per share algorithm. And this pays miners proportionally according to the number of shares submitted divided by the pool target. And we use this equation, score equals N over TP, to represent this. And score really, it's the share score, and it's essentially our way of putting the amount of work a miner performed into a singular number. Now, the pay per share algorithm had some vulnerabilities specifically related to what are called pool hopping attacks. I won't be going into those today as it's not too relevant. However, because of these pool hopping attacks, some other algorithms were made, specifically the pay per last n shares and pay per last n time shares. Both of these algorithms mitigate pool hopping attacks by using some sort of window of time or a hash rate before the block was mined in order to essentially ensure that miners mining on the pool were consistently mining at the time of the block being found. So for both of these algorithms, instead of using n, the total number of shares produced for the block, was found they used NW, which is the number of shares produced within the window. Now, just briefly to go into some of the dangers of centralized mining pools. Let's talk about 51% attacks. Obviously, if a mining pool is quite large in terms of its hash rate, it could threaten the blockchain with a 51% attack, and this can cause a lot of distrust and issues, double spending attacks, etc. Additionally, centralized mining pools could have biased rewards. They could pay miners out unfairly, not according to the work they perform. Or even a centralized mining pool could simply just steal the rewards that all the miners mine for the pool and just not pay the miners at all. This will erode trust in the blockchain and the pool itself. Now finally, transaction censorship could occur as mining pools are producing blocks which end up on the blockchain. They're able to choose which transactions show up on the blockchain. Therefore, they can censor ones that censor transactions from this mixing out due to regulations at the time. And this obviously undermines centralization, neutrality, etc. So the dangers of centralized mining pools. Let's look at some decentralized options for mining pools that have been attempted in the past so that we can avoid these dangers and create a more fair system. So some past decentralized mining pool attempts have already been made. One of the first ones was P2Pool on Monero. Now P2Pool aimed for centralization by operating a peer-to-peer mining pool. It used a dedicated sidechain to record all the shares submitted by miners. While innovative for its time, it proved to have some issues. For one, by using the sidechain, you are only as secure as the hash rate on the sidechain itself. So this P2 pool does not inherit the security of the main blockchain of Monero itself, and it has less hash rate securing it. Furthermore, using a sidechain has a lot of communication between all of the miners on the pool, and it limits the amount of scalability in terms of being able to add more miners to this decentralized pool. To fix some of the problems of P2 pool, Smart Pool was made on Ethereum, and Smart Pool is a protocol which uses smart contracts to create a decentralized mining environment. Now, by using smart contracts, you're able to inherit some of the security of the main blockchain itself. You're not reliant on just the hash rate of the pool. So that's one benefit of Smart Pool. However, one issue with the Smart Pool implementation was that the protocol had quite a few interactions between the miner and the smart contract. In order for the miner to prove that they performed the amount of work that they claimed to perform, they had to send multiple transactions to the smart contract. Now, miners are motivated by really two main reasons while mining on the pool. They want consistent payments, and they want as much reward as they can get. So having multiple transactions with gas fees eats into the amount of rewards that the miner can get, and in general, it discourages miners from joining this decentralized mining pool. So our goal is to search for a new solution, which is fully decentralized, uses smart contracts to try and inherit the security of the main chain, while still having less interactions inside of it so that fees do not fully eat up the rewards gained by the miners. Additionally, since we're using smart contracts, we want to minimize the amount of space being used on the blockchain, as this can always incur additional fees or complications. So if we want to create a decentralized mining pool solution, we have this challenge of measuring mining work within a smart contract. So there are quite few trustless and efficient methods to calculate the amount of work performed inside of a proof of work blockchain. The solution we propose is called a non-interactive shared proof. And the solution we propose enables for an efficient calculation of a miner's work within constant space complexity, regardless of the total amount of shares mined. And this solution was inspired by non-interactive proofs of proof of work. The solution is also blockchain agnostic, and it minimizes the amount of interactions, unlike the Smart Pool protocol, which came before it. So, as I said, we drew the idea for non-interactive shared proofs from NEPA and NEPA are non-interactive proofs of proof of work, which use blocks with especially low hash values, called superblocks, as checkpoints to prove that work was done on the blockchain. So a NEPA is essentially a proof trying to prove some predicate about the blockchain is true. And in order to do this, superblocks, which are these rare blocks with especially low hash values, much lower than the target value of the blockchain itself. These superblocks are then used to show that some certain amount of work was performed and that the chain was mined honestly. To do this, we use this property called goodness. And goodness represents the tendency of hashes on an honestly mined blockchain to follow an expected distribution of superblocks. So in order for a NEPA to be considered valid, goodness must be proven for the relevant subset of blocks on the blockchain. So when we're proving that some predicate about the blockchain is true, we're providing some subset of blocks with especially low hash values to show that a large amount of work was performed in order. Now, if you look at it, in both scenarios for the use case in the proposed and mining pools, we're essentially using the same sort of proof of work inequality. We're leveraging the same exact hash function. We're relying on some threshold target value. For the blockchain, it's the target T, and for the pool, it's the target TP. And inside both scenarios, we're producing a set of hashes with subsets that satisfy an inequality on the threshold target. So our idea is to, just as DeepPows use superblocks as checkpoints, we propose to use super shares as similar checkpoints to prove that miner performed a certain amount of work within a mining pool. Super shares will be shares found which have hash values especially lower than the target TP for the mining pool. Now, to do this, we'll be taking this concept of goodness. Now, as I said before, goodness represents this tendency of block hashes on an honestly mined chain to follow an expected statistical distribution relative to the target of the blockchain. So, if we want to apply this concept to our non-interactive share proof, we can check if inside a set of shares, the distribution of super shares inside the set follows the expected statistical distribution. This goodness property is vital because it provides the proof that the shares were genuinely generated through computational effort. So if we have a set of super shares that possess this goodness property, we can use it as a proof that a miner performed some amount of work. This proof will be non-interactive in nature because there's no need for the smart contract to ask the miner for any additional information. All the smart contract needs to verify the proof is to see that the shares provided add up to the expected statistical distribution for the miner's given target. So let's dive into our misconstruction model. So inside of our model, we operate in distinct rounds where each round signifies the mining of a new block by the mining pool. So throughout each round, miners will continuously engage in hashing, producing shares, and subsequently submitting proofs of their work to some smart contract block verifier at the end of the round. This process ensures validation and proper attribution of mining efforts within the protocol. So let's look at our key variables here. Now, the most important variable, the one that you should pay attention to, is this variable TAW. Now, TAW will be the miner's personal maximum target. So, a share produced by a miner is valid if its hash satisfies the condition hash of W is less than TAW. So, TAW will essentially be the miner's personal target threshold, which divides their hashes from shares. So, to represent the TAW as difficulty, we can just do 2 to the 256 over TAW, where 2 to the 256 is the maximum value for 256-bit hash. Our next variable is N, which will be a protocol-wide constant representing the total number of shares per round. Now, this is in contrast to some of the previous share processing algorithms we discussed earlier. Inside those algorithms, the number of shares used was seen as a way of calculating the amount of work that the miner performed. Inside our system, the number of shares that a miner aims to produce will be constant. All miners will aim to produce the same number of shares. Our next variable W is the window of time, specified in seconds. And this is needed because we want to minimize the amount of usage of space used inside of the smart contract, verifying our non-interactive share proofs. Variable I will be the specific level at which a proof is submitted, where 1 is less than or equal to I is less than or equal to mu. Now, the level is essentially a representation of how hard the supershare was to find. So supershares will have different hash values compared to their target value that they're being made from. And different supershares will have different levels. A level of 1 means that the supershare is particularly lower than the target value of the miner. And as the levels go up, the supershares get closer and closer to the original target value of the miner at the top. Because I is constrained by mu, you can say that there's a set constant number of levels allowed inside of our model. Now, S is the set of supershares that are included within the submitted proof P. P is the proof submitted by the miner. H is the hash function, and lowercase h is the miner's hash rate. So each round within this model commences upon successful mining of a block by the mining pool. During the active round, miners will perform the mining process and generate shares. Once the round concludes and a block is mined, miners are required to compile and submit their proof P, which encapsulate their best set of supershares S to the designated smart contract verifier for evaluation. So as we said earlier, supershares can be at different levels. For a share to be valid, the share must conform to the inequality over here. S is less than ta times I divided by n. And this inequality simply states that for a supershare to be valid for a certain level, it must satisfy this inequality. What this really means is that each supershare at a specific level will be significantly harder to mine. And as we said earlier, the goal for miners is to generate n shares and strategically find the optimal subset of supershares to construct a proof P that is at some level I. A proof is considered valid if it has the property of goodness inside of it. Along with that, a proof will only be considered valid if it has exactly I shares inside of it. So I not only is the level, it also tells you how many shares are within inside the non-interactive share proof itself. And the total number of shares allowed is, of course, mu, which we mentioned earlier. Now, we assume that all miners will be rational. What that means is that miners will operate with stable and consistent hash rates, and they will be expected to select and adjust their personal target TOB in a manner that optimizes their anticipated rewards, while ensuring that the proofs remain valid and compliant with the protocol rules. So miners will be adjusting their TOB value according to their hash rate in order to try and gain rewards according to the amount of work that they performed. Now, in order to calculate the share score for our protocol, As we said earlier, we do not take into account the value N, the number of shares that the miner produced. So instead of incorporating that value into our share score calculation, we simply use the miner's difficulty, which would be 2 to the 256 over tau. Because the miner's payout only is related to the miner's tau value, miners are freely able to adjust how much they are able to get paid inside of this protocol. Now, this model seems to work pretty well. However, there are some problems. If we allow miners to freely adjust their tau value, then there could be some vulnerabilities. The main vulnerability here is what's called the target adjustment attack. So an adversarial miner could generate their shares during the round, and once generated, they can analyze all of the shares that they produced, look for the lowest level subset of shares that they found inside their set, and then adjust their tau value retroactively to allow themselves to always get paid the maximum value for the amount of work that they performed. The issue with this is, of course, that miners will be able to always get rewarded for whatever work and in order to change their tau value, miners will have to wait one round before their changes take effect. What this enforces is that miners are unable to retroactively change their tau value after producing some set of shares. Therefore, they're unable to use their set of shares and always get paid for it, regardless if it met their expected statistical distribution of super shares inside their set. Now, one downside of this solution is that it does require some sort of interaction. However, unlike the smart bill protocol, the interaction between the miner and smart contract does not need to be performed for every single share proof submission. And for irrational miners with consistent and stable hash rates, a single commitment to tau is likely all that is needed. So to look at tau and see the effect of how changing it affects the miner rewards, let's define the concept of the ideal tau value. So the idea of this ideal tau value is that miners will always want to tend towards some value of tau which is proportional to their hash rate. Two miners with the same hash rate will ideally have equal tau values. We provided a potential calculation here, but in reality, the ideal tau will likely be dependent on a few factors, including hardware specifics and what level of consistency in payments is suitable for the miner. And that part about consistency in payments is very important here, because as you can see, with the inflated tau, miners who are producing more than n shares per round on average will have what's called an inflated tau value. When the tau value is inflated, there is essentially miners are receiving less amount of rewards for the true amount of work that they're performing. This is because with the tau value inflated, the amount of super shares produced will be increased. However, the share score calculations will have this higher tau value on it, and their payments will be reduced. Now, they will get paid more consistently, that they will always, or they will be more likely to produce a subset of super shares from their entire set. However, because the tau value is higher, they will get paid less. Now, the opposite is true for a deflated tau value. So at a deflated tau value, the miner is producing less than n shares per round. When the tau value is deflated in this way, the super shares that the miner is producing are of a lower hash value than when they're using their ideal tau. Because the hash value is lower, they are getting paid higher amounts. However, because it's harder for the miner to produce that number of super shares with the hardware that they have, they will be more likely to have an invalid proof that could not prove goodness for their hash rate. So deflating the tau value increases the inconsistency inside of the miner's payouts. And really, the crux of this ideal tau is that the game theory between the miner wanting to maximize the rewards and maximize the consistency in their payouts will lead to miners finding some ideal tau value which does both of these things for them. Now, we already have a real-world application of a non-interactive shared proof protocol. So Lithos protocol is currently live on testnet of the Ergo blockchain. And it is operating as a decentralized mining pool protocol using non-interactive share proofs. Additionally, it uses an optimistic roll-up design where non-interactive share proofs are evaluated using fraud proofs. Now, this is only possible due to the minimal interaction requirements inherent inside the NISPs themselves. And really, this served as quite a big evolution over the past pooling attempts of Smart Pool and P2Pool. So future directions for non-interactive share proofs. As we mentioned earlier, non-interactive share proof collateralized mining pools. You could have a Bitcoin mining pool which pays miners in Bitcoin tokens on the Ergo blockchain. Additionally, there could be alternative algorithms for NISPs. The algorithm or the model that we presented here was resembling the PPLNT processing mentioned earlier. However, other payment systems are possible. Additionally, there are other ways to potentially level our shares and define super shares in different manners. There's also the possibility of rewarding partial proofs based on the quality of the goodness inside the set of super shares. Beyond mining pools, there could be applications for smart contract-based hash rate lending, governance based on the amount of work provided by a miner, and really any application which has proper incentive structures that incorporate work could utilize this community protocol. Right, that's the presentation. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you, Kirat. Any questions? Yeah.
So, how efficient is implementation of NISPs? So, what are on-chain costs?
So the on-chain costs, in terms of at least space complexity, so far from what we've seen inside Lithos testnet already, the minimum size for this is around 3,000 bytes, and we've set maximum size to be around 40,000 bytes most. The NISPs themselves, they are a collection of 10 super shares, along with the proof of a certain transaction being included inside of the share being mined. In terms of computational complexity, because we're using fraud proofs, most of the work is done off-chain to evaluate the NISP. And the only computation occurs when fraud is found. When fraud is found, a fraud proof is created, and fraud is proven for whichever miner posted the dishonestness onto the pool's dictionary.
Any other question? Okay, thank you, Kirat. Yeah, bye.
Goodbye, guys.
Yeah, bye.